Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Section 109 podcast from Studio Breezy. We got Bobble Juan, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Matthew, and distinguished guest, Coach Rod Underwood.
Hi guys, what's up?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get to the substantive stuff, what's the best thing you've eaten so far this year? Since we are a food podcast,
Some might say this is the substantive stuff.
Let's see here. Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
He was prepped for the soccer questions, folks. I don't think he was prepped for the hard-hitting food questions.
I don't know. I've eaten so much food because we've traveled so much.
What's your favorite travel go-to game day meal? When you hear they're bringing X, Y, or Z, what makes you excited? Or conversely, what makes you go, oh, not again?
Someone's going to get in trouble with this answer.
Yeah, Jordan won't like my answers.
I don't know if Jordan cares what Rod eats. I'm guessing he cares what the players eat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really on game day, a typical day for us is like we're up for breakfast and then you have a middle of the afternoon pregame, and it really just depends for me. Sometimes I'll just like take breakfast and save it for later and just have that for the pregame. It just depends.
Are you not a big breakfast guy?
I love breakfast foods, but I'm not a big breakfast guy.
So ideal morning, what are you eating? Are you having coffee? Are you just having water? Are you nothing? What are you?
Coffee and water. That's typical. And then after training, I'll have something. But it's usually like a bar or some nuts and then in the afternoon, maybe a bagel.
Okay. And then I know you do some cardio. You do some running. Are you running in the morning?
I run in the morning before training, yeah.
Fasted then? So just with you're running on just water and coffee?
Yeah, I'll usually use some...
And anger? I don't know how else you motivate yourself for a run in the morning on no food.
I usually take some gels, energy gels. Usually use 2 of those typically in the morning.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, you're pretty peculiar about your coffee. I was talking to Alex in the office.
Says a guy who does not drink coffee, anything but black and hot. Matthew doesn't believe it should ever be iced or anything should be put in it ever. So peculiar coffee is interesting coming from you.
First off, that's just fundamentally correct. But no, she said something about that Amazon sent you the wrong coffee.
Yes. So I only drink decaf because I don't need any more caffeine. So I always drink decaf. And my favorite is Illy's coffee. It's an Italian coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like my favorite. I just had some. Where were we? Where we got stranded last? Philly.
You were stranded. Did you have fully caffeinated or still decaf?
Decaf, yeah. But they had an Illy's coffee shop in the airport, so I enjoyed my Illy's coffee.
Oh, nice little treat.
Yes.
Treat on the road. Okay.
Yeah.
But she said something. She said that you got sent the wrong coffee and you were drinking it.
Yeah, because I didn't really realize it because I ordered decaf, so I didn't pay attention to it. So for about a week, I was drinking caffeinated coffee, and that was not a good thing. I was like, what's going on here?
Why am I so intense at training? The guy's like, boy, Rod sure is intense today. It's locked in.
But I didn't pay attention. I didn't look at the container or anything.
Yeah, you'd done the job. You'd ordered it. That's all you needed to do. So you weren't able to be at the CFC groundbreaking. Obviously, you were on the road. It was actually a game day. What's the impact to the club from your perspective on the new building that's coming?
Yeah, I think it's a game changer, right? I think, when we get into the real things about what we are as an independent and what MLS clubs have, one thing that we've always talked about as a coaching staff and even inside on the technical side of the club is like, what are our marginal gains, right? What are the things that we can do to try to level the playing field as much as we can, because we're never going to level the playing field because simply dollars are dollars, right? Mm-hmm. But adding this building with all the players in the same location, which we have players in, but definitely it's ours. It's a space where, hopefully, rehab can take place there. We hope, there's restaurants, a gym in there, just things where it can really be a place where players can really feel comfortable. I think there's going to be a a big lounge area where guys can come in, play video games, watch TV. So a common space in that building too. So
Very cool. And walking distance to the field. So if a guy doesn't have a car or doesn't want to have a car, maybe they don't have to.
yeah, I mean the location is just as important as the building.
But it's not over top of Southside Social either.
No.
I can imagine. I can't imagine rather a better location as far as proximity wise.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing you've learned? This is a Matthew question, I think, and I really, really like this one. What's the biggest thing you've learned about this league, about MLS Next Pro, since we started playing in March?
I think if you look from the footballing side of it, just the relentless play, the end-to-end relentless tempo of the game. And the league has done a good job of creating parity where even though, you can see there's a first place team, there's a last place team. But if you look at the scores, right, the scores are typically pretty close. But just the relentless tempo of the game where, at around the world, football is different. It's in the sense of like, there's tempo, there's various rhythms, there's various tempos. You have tempo and rhythm in this game, but you don't have this wide variance. Like if you're watching, even though let's say English Premier League, which is a very high tempo league, but also you can also see where the game just really drops off, right? You don't have this big drop. It's it might be a 10 and a 9. That's kind of where you are.
I've noticed it's incredibly hard to if you've got a 2-goal lead, 15 minutes to go, and you just want to kill the game.
Oh, look at Carolina Core really struggled to do that against us the other night.
It's incredibly hard in this league.
It is. It's very hard
to do that.
But that's the parity of the league, though. That's the parity of the league. That's what MLS wants. I mean, obviously, you see it in the first teams, right? They look at the league; it's very, very close. Kind
of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I was watching a late night MLS game on Saturday, like I typically do. Like one of the West Coast games. And it was just constant back and forth. Just it's really interesting that Next Pro is mirroring.
Yeah.
At a obviously a little bit lower quality.
Yeah.
It's just mirroring MLS.
Right.
Like full on preparation for, and I would guess that the decision makers at HQ were trying to build MLS long term to, I would say, overtake the Premier League in style and obviously they want to make it the biggest, best, whatever. But it's not modeled on Spain; it's modeled on England.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bigger than that. A friend of mine we were talking. He coaches in Serie A in Italy, so we were talking, and he's like, one of the things that we think that American football is catching up, but what's catching up, the game is changing, and the game is becoming much more athletic, and American. In general, are some of the best athletes in the world,
right?
And so that's kind of equalizing the game. But if you look at the footballing side, we still have a ways to go, in terms of technique and tactics, and also to some extent what the game really means. Because clubs around the world are really community clubs, right? Even the biggest clubs. I mean, you got all these clubs in London, but they still are, it's still that area of a 10-mile radius, that's the club.
Yeah.
This is what they represent. And I think when we start getting to those things, I think you'll start to see some more nuance in the game.
Matthew, why don't you take the next one?
There was kind of one listener question that was along those lines, but it was more about, I think you already touched on it a little bit, but it was more about the player profile of our opponents, in terms of something that you've learned that maybe you didn't necessarily expect, or just you thought it would be this way, and it turns out it was even more of that way than you thought going in.
Well, I think one of the biggest things in general is, right, you have these young players that have, for the most part, in a general sense, they put all their eggs in one basket, right? They're going to be a pro, right? 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, well, I'm going to go to college first. I'm going to get an education, and then I'll see if I can play after college, I will. Now it's, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and they're like, this is all I'm going to do. And so they are, training with first team, training with $10, $20 million players, right? And they're coming in, getting their games in the second division of the league, of MLS. And that definitely is changing that mentality from those young players. And also, I would say the number of minutes that young players are getting before the age of 18. The quality ones, the ones that have a legitimate chance of like getting a real first team contract. So I think, but in terms of player profile, it's not much I didn't know. I think I always thought I thought the league was very athletic. I thought the league was very athletic, was geared toward more of an open game, not so much controlling the game. So that was understood. If anything, I would say the mentality is quite good for these young players, but the decision making, I'm still not sure on like the way that the league is played will ultimately lead to these guys not just getting a first team contract, but being a key player, a key contributor in the top 11 on a regular basis. Because that's ultimately where we need to get to in America now. It's no longer like, we got an American player. They're in the 30-man roster. That's not important anymore. It needs to be, is your name going to be in and around the starting 11 every week? That's where we have to get to.
No, totally. So I think something that's come true that you said to Matthew and I at some point before we kicked off this season, which was that like this is a big step up from NISA. This is much closer to a D2 league than a D3 league. Yeah. And I think I really didn't have anything to base that on, but I didn't believe that. I didn't want to believe that. I don't know. I think pretty clearly you watch. I don't know. You watch a USL Championship game, and those USL Championship teams, a lot of them will beat MLS Next Pro teams, I think. But they'll beat them not because they're better, but because maybe they don't make as many mistakes as young players, like in the Open Cup as an example. But I think you look at the talent and the type of play, and there's the MLS Next Pro offers some really high-level play at times, and some really high-level players, and some really good teams. I mean, that Philly team is young, but they're good. I mean, we were unlucky. I shouldn't say obviously. I feel like we were unlucky not to get something from that first half. But they showed exactly why they're so good in that second half when they made us pay.
Yeah.
But also, you look at a Philly versus I don't know. I guess I don't know where I'm going with that, other than to say like I think the league is a higher standard than I thought it was going to be. Do you think it's a higher standard? I mean, you like I said, you said early on that it was going to be a higher standard than we thought it was. But do you think it was even higher than you thought, or?
Well, I said to everybody around, I said, look, the league's gonna be good. The league's gonna be difficult. The league's gonna be good. The league's gonna be difficult. There's gonna be good players in the league. What I will say is, I do think, like to your point of like USL Championship and this league, USL Championship has experience. So they have a lot more experienced players, a lot more players that have, dropped out of MLS or dropped out of pretty good leagues around the world. And so they have dealt with those pressures of football being the everything, winning and losing being the everything. And that's a separating factor, right? Because you still don't have that yet in MLS Next Pro, because teams look at it as a development league. And so, okay, we lost, but I think that's what separates USL Championship. And there's some in USL Championship, the high level players are really high level. For whatever reason, they're not in MLS, or they choose not to be in MLS, they choose not to be wherever, but they're high level players for sure. But there's high level young players in this league, but you're going to get high level young players making 17, 18, 19-year-old mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've likened it to the championship and Next Pro. That comparison is a different game. Because they're different games.
Yeah.
My comparison for League One, as an example, is it's a different sport.
Yeah.
Which is rude, but also like it's true. Like it's just the way the game is played. I was watching a Jägermeister Cup game Thursday night because I'm me and it was on. You know, what else are you going to watch at 11 p.m. at night?
Never heard of it.
And like I've never seen that set of 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it was. I've never seen that set of 30 minutes in Next Pro, and I've watched a lot of Next Pro this year. Like, it's just not the same sport.
I have a hot take question. Do you feel like some of the young defending in MLS Next Pro is naive?
Oh yeah, it has to be though, right? I mean, it's just what it is, right? Because you also look at the number of goals that teams give up, but you also look at the number of goals that teams have scored, right? I mean, and you know, there is like, if you start looking at leagues around the world, how many teams in the top 5 have given up 20 goals in the whole season?
Right.
You know, you've got teams that are, you know, a little over halfway through the season pushing 30 goals, right? And, you know, only halfway through the season. So it's definitely clear, but it also leads to the structure of the league that it's about development. It's about being free. It's about being accepting of the mistakes. And that's also leads to the naivety and goals scored and goals against.
I was just looking at this. Like, Philadelphia's played 18 games. They're best team in the Eastern Conference right now. One of the 2 best teams in the league overall. They've given up 18 goals.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and
like, that's a
Cincinnati's
feature.
walked in there and beat them twice.
Like, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, I mean, because like for us, right, I mean, we've given up 26, and that puts us in the top 5 or 6 in the Eastern Conference. And that's a big number. That's a massively big number of goals given up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's something that I think before the recent slide, I think Matthew and I felt like one of the ways we were staying with these teams that are scoring so many goals when we're not always scoring as many goals was that like our defense made less errors. Like we made less, we just allowed less. And you know, if you look at the underlying numbers, we're not actually allowing that much different than we were. But like we certainly still have one of the better defenses in the league. And I think part of that is age.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And experience.
Yeah. But that was the reality trying to build this team because, number one, we didn't have an academy that was ready for young players to come in. Number two, even if we did, we just don't have access to the talent level of these teams because it's like I equate it to like going to a Division I college, going to a Division II college, going to a Division III, going to NAIA. So if you are Division I and you're typically a top 10 team, right? You're gonna have access to all the best players before the bottom 25 do, unless the player really wants to go to your school, right? And so we're the same boat, right? That we're out looking. We would, if you're out looking for young players and young talent, you have to be able to convince them. Okay, don't go to Atlanta, come to us. Don't go to Nashville, come to us, right? Mm-hmm. But for instance, there are players younger players that are playing in the league that didn't come to us because when they signed their contract, they were like, well, we've been told we have access to we have a pathway to play on the first team. And so those are things
not something we can offer.
No, it's not something we can offer. But so we had to go for that next level type player that believe they still have potential to make a jump to a USL Championship team, make a jump to an MLS team, or make a move to a smaller European club, European league. So those are the kind of players that we have. Because if we were to say, okay, let's say Philly's average age is 18, we're gonna have an average age of 18. We're not gonna have that level of player. But also, when you look at, and it's not fair to look at Philly either because
what they've done at their academy and the investment in the academy has been unbelievable.
Yeah, that's totally different. So it's you need to throw the outliers out. You need to throw the Red Bulls out. They've kind of slid over the years in terms of development. You know, FC Dallas, you need to throw that out. You need to throw out Philadelphia because the investment that they've put in is clearly that's their plan for development. Now you start to look at, you know, the Portlands of the world who have a very small area to choose from, right? They don't, because when I last lived in Oregon, there was only 70,000 registered players in the whole state.
Wow.
So you go to Southern California, there's got to be 500,000 registered that you know about that aren't playing in non-sanctioned leagues. 500,000. I mean, 500,000. That's like, so if LA and LAFC were really serious about development, and imagine LAFC putting the investment that Philly does with that access to that number of players, because development's about two things: players and dollars. People want to say, yeah, it's the coaching. It is the coaching. The coaching's really important. But if you've got 100 players to coach and someone's got 10,000 players to coach, and you're exactly the same coach, who's going to have the greater chance of having young players develop? The numbers speak for themselves.
And you can give more money to the better coach as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Dollars go. They don't solve everything, but they
help.
They help. they definitely help.
All right, since
You had a philosophical question here. Did you want to?
yeah, Breezy, since you alluded to the poor run of results for let's just say it. I had a philosophical question, especially because in our past conversations on this podcast and off for that matter, you're obviously incredibly process driven, and we call it the ROTSES here. And so this question, it kind of relates to that. How do you evaluate a team? And this can be this season. This can be go back on your previous coaching history here and elsewhere. How do you evaluate a team in the middle of a rough period and determine whether to continue to trust the process or to make a course correction or a change?
So for me, you never go away from your fundamental core values. You never. You don't go away from those. But what you do is you tweak those. You find where some of those core values aren't at the level that you want. So do you tweak them by player change? Do you tweak them by the way you approach that particular area? So there's multiple ways to look at it, right? So for us, what we've tried to do is, right, what we feel like in this run, we've kind of gone away from our identity, right? So if we start looking at numbers, right, our possession stats down, our winning the ball back quickly has gone down. So there's certain areas that we say, okay, well, how do we get back to those? Because when we look at the start of the season, I mean, we were 55 to 60% possession. That number's dropped. We were somewhere between 5 and 10 passes winning the ball back. That's above 10. So those are things that we have to look at, right? Our goals against has gone up, but then so we look at like, okay, if our possession's dropped and we're not winning the ball back fast enough, so we've never been a great chance creation type team, but that's gone down because we don't have the ball, so we're giving more chances. Why? Because we don't have the ball. So if you start to look at those things, right? I mean, but there's also things to look at too, right? Do you drop let's say your goal was to be at 57%. Do you drop it down to 55, 54 and a half that you get, and maybe that creates 2 or 3 more chances. So those are the little things that you look at. So the core and the approach doesn't change, but how do you tweak things to ultimately win games? Because that's what it comes down to. It's not about, in the end, whatever I say, the most important thing is to win games. That's it. So,
speaking of winning games, last couple games seems like we've got some luck that's going against us. From my point of view, how do you look at those games and how do you trust the? So you made a big formation change. I guess I'll ask it that way.
Yeah.
You made a big formation change. What prompted that, if you don't mind sharing, or whatever part you want to share? And then, how do you evaluate whether you stick with it when the results don't immediately come, at least on the wins and losses front?
Also, real quick, will you share what how you would describe that formation in the numerical? So a 3-4-3, a 3, whatever that is, mostly to settle a bet.
Yeah. So for us, the formation change was we just wanted to get more bodies in the midfield because we felt like if we improve that area, we could improve other parts of the game. But it meant giving up a defender, which was very hard for me to give up a defender because I I believe in a back four, but again, doing what you need to do to try to win the game is, you take some risk, right? So, so for us, it was a 3. It was a 3 and then a 2 in front, and then a 4, and then there was a 1 and a 2. So, but in essence, it could have been 3-4-3, right? You could say 3-4-3 because also too the formations aren't super like
they're fluid.
Yeah,
don't tell the nerds that.
Yeah. So in essence, it could have been a 3, right, and then a 2, right, and then another 2 in front of those and with a box. So it could look like a box. Then you have 2 wide guys, right, and then you have a 1. So in these wide guys make a 3. These wide guys make a 4. Right. So that was kind of the idea, and also getting people closer to Mehdi, because Mehdi, we haven't even seen what Mehdi can do yet. I mean, when he's had the support and he's had things, he's one of the best strikers in the league. But he's been kind of left on an island. So we're also looking at how do we solidify the midfield? How do we get Mehdi more help? Those are kind of the 2 things to think about.
Okay. Breezy, I'm going to let you play off of this.
The first half against Philly felt pretty good. Obviously, second half was what it was. Red cards will change. Did you feel like we saw what we wanted to in the Carolina core game out of the new formation? And I noticed you switched back to a 4 in the second half of Philly and at some point in the second half of Carolina. And is that like personnel driven? Is that just game situation driven? Like, curious why the switch back to at least what to me looked like a more of a traditional 4-3-3 in points in those games.
Yeah, I think in the Philly game is simply the red card changed, right? So that changed. So I mean, if you look at the start of the Philly game, I mean, Cullum put 2 good balls through for Mehdi. You score one of those, right? Because also if you look at the big picture, right? When's the last time we scored the first goal, right? So,
it hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah, so
New England Revolution at home, because it was the only goal.
Yeah, so when you look at those things, because goals change games, right? So you score the first goal, you get this burst of energy. We were talking sciencey stuff. I won't get into all that, but that stuff goes into that, right? So you get that gives you a drive, that lifts you for 10, 12, 15 minutes, right? And then the other team's on the ropes, and then they have to react to what you're doing, not you reacting to what they're doing. So I think that's also a factor, not scoring the first goal, because goals change games. So if we get one of those goals, it's different. Nice header by Duvon, and then we came out in the second half, and we were slow starting the half, and then we give up a goal, and then we get the red card, and then that
just kills the game off.
It kills the game from there, yeah. Because 2 things that data will tell you. Once you give up a penalty and once you go get a red card, data is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Because it's just not, because the expected goals of a penalty is 0.79.
Right.
So at 0.79, your automatic almost is a 1. If you have a half decent, right? If you have a half decent expected goals, you get close to 2, and 2 tells you that you typically win a fair amount of games.
Right.
So, and then red cards, I mean, it just changes everything.
Yeah. So, one thing that, so I went through, we have some publicly available data through American Soccer Analysis, and one thing that I started tracking, puppies. One thing I started tracking, or I have been tracking this year for the first time, is our opponent, where the game is, and then our XG, opponent XG, our possession, our opponent possession, and then from there, like running average, and then first 9 games and last 9 games, because we're at 18, and there was a nice. I'm playing with the numbers a little bit because there's that nice, Miami win, and then Crown loss for the 9th and 10th game. So it's interesting. But my numbers have us, and obviously we do our own XG, so the numbers might be a little bit different. But I've got us within 100th in the first 9 games versus the second 9 games in both XG for and against. So basically no change. Like we are we kind of are who we are at this point and have been. So my question is, there are a lot of listener questions about like, why are we suddenly losing games? Like and a lot of, how do we all of a sudden not in the future? And so like if we were answering this without you on the podcast, I would probably talk a lot about two things. One, finishing luck, and then scoring first, because in the first 9 games, we scored first in 8 of those games. The one exception being the loss at Atlanta, 1-goal game. In the second 9 games, the last 9 games we've played, we scored first once in a 1-0 game at home. We're the only team scoring. So I'm curious, like that's the me part, looking at it from a spreadsheets point of view. And for the listeners, the game is played on spreadsheets, just to be clear. But like from a coaching perspective, and someone who's obviously very involved in data and looking at data and forming decisions, it's not that simple though, right? Like it's not just like ball going first.
So I think when you break out the expected goals per chance, that's probably gone up in the second half of those 9 games. Because think about the number of tap-ins we've given away inside the 6.
Yeah.
Relative to the first 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of those
There's a bunch of cumulative XG.
Yeah. So those individual chances, like
Huntsville was a dropped ball that was tapped in. Miami was the two different both goals in the Miami home game.
Yeah.
Were inside the 6.
Yeah.
Orlando was inside the 6.
Right.
So we would give up, if I'm understanding you correctly, we would give up big moments.
Yes.
That led to goals and those bigger XG chances.
Right.
And those would be goals.
Yeah.
But like mostly nothing that crazy else.
No.
But in the second half, we're giving up just like a cumulative amount of chances that sometimes go in, sometimes bad defending, sometimes mistakes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And those are a bigger deal because they're not just an individual drop inside the 6. That
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, the first goal is a big deal. But also I mean, the league is transitional, and we found ourselves in a lot of transition, but that's a lot of transition because we haven't winning the ball back soon enough, and we haven't kept the ball long enough. Because there's certain things that we look at, right? Like long stretches of possession, right? We don't want those short 10-second possessions because it means that the game's like this. We were looking for those 20, 30, 40-second possessions where the game looks like we're on top of it. So we want to tilt the field instead of sprint the field. And I think that's what's happening right now. We're sprinting the field.
Well, we're not built to sprint.
No.
We're built to control.
Yes.
But not sprint.
But we need more control.
Do you feel like some of that is related to Tolly getting hurt and then followed by Jesus getting hurt?
Yeah, I mean, because, when we look at it, right, Jesus was playing at a high level. Tolly is,
he's back, but he was really, I felt like the first couple games after he was out, we were struggling at times to.
And I think too, guys like Minjay and Callum, who we felt were going to be very important players for us, them getting injured, and then they got injured at a time when the team's playing a high level, we're training high. So even though they're working, they still have a long ways to go. And I know Minjay's now played 4 or 5 games, but he was out on a significant injury in the offseason. But that's also because Minjay was a long play. Minjay wasn't a short-term play. Minjay was a long-term play for us. And we were just hoping that at some point in the season he would be able to contribute at a high level. And we still think that he can. But it wasn't, if it was a short play, we wouldn't have signed Minjay because of the surgery that he had and how long he was going to be out. But it was a long play. And so we're still banking on the long play that he comes in. But there's just a lot, right? Because one thing about our teams is the teams that we try to build is that preseason is critical. Mm-hmm. 6 weeks of solid learning our football. because our possession's slightly different. And so we had a piece, because if you go back and look at our last preseason game, we set Tralis in our last preseason game, if I'm not mistaken. We had guys that we weren't sure about in that last preseason game.
It's one of the reasons why I haven't been able to actually count that as an official game.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I have the full lineup yet.
Yeah, because, you think about first game of the season, Ethan played up front, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so
Played pretty well.
yeah, he did. Yeah, so when you look, and I love Ethan.
Ethan's got a goal this season.
Yeah, he's been very good young player, very professional. It's nothing I have negative to say about Ethan, but it just wasn't his position. So, and then we had. The way we forced Duvon in because we were short on numbers, and so he played earlier than he should have. Jude got in late. So it's, again, about no excuse, but we're still trying to get everyone together, right? Because Cullum, Minjay, and you could say, well, Jude's played a lot of minutes, and he's learning and all these things. But I think we're still in a place where the way that we try to play football is intricate. The way that we try to play is different. And so I think I'm super excited about the next 10 games because I believe even when we're winning games, I don't think we're even close to the level that we could play. So for me, it's like, how do we get to that level that we can play? Because if we get to that level we can play, we'll be dangerous. And that's what we're kind of looking at.
So 10 games to go. In 10 weekends, like our last break is over. Like, this is it now.
Yeah.
So going through having the real positive start to the season in terms of points accumulated, which has been crazy huge for us.
Yeah.
Because it's also like everybody feels bad. I'm sure you guys feel bad about the last 4, but it feels bad because we lost 4 in a row, not because of necessarily where we sit in the table. Because if you win a couple, then you lose one, and then you win a couple, then you lose one. All season long, your expectations are one thing, but unfortunately, we murdered it early, and then like when we have the slide where we see us go from 2nd to 7th or whatever, like it feels much worse. But objectively, like we're still right in the playoff hunt. Like we just have to start getting points again.
Yeah, I think the thing is, right, and I talked to. One thing that we wanted to do when I came was we really wanted to create a winning culture and a professional culture. And I think we did that over 2 years. I mean, people can say what they want to say about NISA, but the reality is, the Eastern Conference was what it was, but there were still some very good high-level teams because you go and look at Cal and look at some of these players in Cal are still playing in USL, playing USL Championship, So it's not like there were weak teams. Yeah, there were some bad teams, right? We get all that, right? But there were also some very good teams. And so the competition was there. Now, were they as professional as these MLS Next pro teams? Of course not. But they had high-level players who came from – many had been drafted. Many had been in USL 1 or Championship. Many had been at really high-level Division I colleges, especially the West Coast colleges, right? So we've built a winning culture and a winning philosophy and a winning belief, and that also – we're experiencing something that as a club we haven't really experienced in 2 years. We got punched in the face twice in the semifinals, and we should have been in the finals, and we really should have won at least one championship, and we haven't. So, but it's not the same as because you don't win the championship, but you win the regular season, or you finish 2nd in the regular season. You still can look in and you can say that was really a good season, right? Or you can do well in Open Cup and then have a nice run being the last team that was left standing of professional teams not to lose. Those are things that when you create a winning culture, you're disappointed about not winning, but you're also you can become a realist and say, this wasn't too bad, right? Would have liked to have the ultimate? Yes, we'd like to have the ultimate. And so now losing 4 in a row, it's not that you lost 4 games. It's about you've lost 4 in a row and you've created a winning culture, and you were high up the table, and you received all these accolades, and everybody was making you believe you were the best thing since sliced bread, and now you're in this spot. And that's why the emotions of how they feel.
How do you break out of those?
Win. Like I said, look,
Ball go in net.
I'm super excited, right? I mean, I have no concern that we're not going to get to the level that we need to get to. You know, we'll have to manage bodies because, as you say, there's a lot of games in a short period of time. They're going to be guys over this stretch of games that maybe haven't seen very minutes that they're going to be called upon. So, you know, those are things that we really have to look at, and we really feel like that we're going to go in the right direction. We will go in the right direction, and we're not nervous about it because when you look at the standings, right, we got 2 home games. Let's get 2 positive results in these home games, and you put yourself in a spot, right? Because I do believe that when people look at our team and say this team's good, they're just like in a bad spot right now. And I think if we get back to winning, I think that will affect how teams approach the game toward us. Right now, they're just trying to get on top of it. Let's get it while they're down. Right? Let's knock them while they're down. But I think if we come back, we get to the place where we want to be. I think that changes how teams approach games and what they do. And you know, I think that's really because if you look at it, right, what Atlanta did when they bought certain players down to play, what Crown did when they bought certain players to play, because they didn't feel like they could. They wanted to be more competitive. And in both cases, it worked out for them. So good on them. That's also the other side of MLS, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that? How do you justify or feel good or not feel good, I guess, about it when these other teams have this competitive advantage where they can just send guys down that they're not normally down?
That's what we signed up for, right? So that's what we signed up for. So you take it as is, right? You take it as a challenge, right? Because also what we tell these guys and what we preach to these guys is, right, look, you get a chance to play against potential first-team guys or first-team players that are coming down. Here's your moment, right? Because at the end of the day,
that's where they want to be.
Yeah, that's where they want to be. And sport is a win and loss business, no matter what sport you're in. And what I always tell players, right, if you win and you're on a winning team and you maybe only played a few minutes for a game, you can say, well, I didn't play because, so-and-so was an all-star and the team was really very high. But guess what? It cracks the door for you to walk somewhere. And so those are things that I think that also motivates players to try to play at a high level, right? And also for these guys, right, especially our international guys, and even our domestics, most of them come from winning teams or they have been big players on their teams. And so losing is not something typically that they've experienced. So we really are, you're managing that, and then I think what you're starting to see too is, right, some of that turning into leadership and guys really stepping up and trying to move the team forward. Because we as a coaching staff, we can't move them forward by ourselves. They need the leadership, the connectivity, and all those things that will allow them to get to their level.
Halfway through the season now, roughly, a little bit more actually. How are you feeling about the penalty shootouts after ties?
Same. We get the 2 points, I'm happy. We don't get the 2 points. But again, right, it's the
same, by the way, exactly the same. Yeah.
It is part of. Look, this is a big picture thing. This is me assuming, right?
Sorry, I should have tightened that up before you got here.
I do believe, right, when you look at the league, I do believe MLS believes there's going to be some players in this MLS Next Pro that's going to play in the next couple World Cups, if it's 26 or the one after that, right? And we see look at the Euros. Look how many penalty shootouts were in the Euros. Look at Copa. Look how many games went to penalties, right? And if we're training these young players now, preferably the domestic American young players, if they get into these big situations, penalties aren't just like because in the past, you took a penalty when you took one in the game. Guys practice penalties when they were just messing around at the end of training. but now it has to be part of your training. So now, and then they've also, and let's give them credit, they've created real situational penalty kick taking that now when players get into high stakes games, they're comfortable. As comfortable as you can be, because you're always going to be nervous. It's one-on-one, mano and mano, and you make it, you're a star. You lose it, you're not so good. So I think that I get the premise behind it. So, but again, we get 2 points, love it. We don't get 2 points, I don't like it.
Me too. Me too. And thank you for sharing that perspective, because I hadn't actually thought about the high leverage preparation part. That's a good way to think about it.
So I'm going to go back to like these next 10 games. 10 games in 10 weeks. It's the run up to the playoffs now. This is the business end of the season. We can kind of throw out, and I think we're level on, as of recording, we're level on points with Red Bulls.
Correct.
for 7th and 8th. Although we have a better goal difference and they're ahead of us in the standings because it goes wins.
I think it's first is wins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. That's either that's only going to matter if it comes down to the last game of the season.
Last day.
Let's not leave it that long for my heart.
Yeah, you and me both.
But in obviously in other leagues, it's a table. There's no playoffs, but that's not here.
Nope.
So it doesn't really matter that we took 28 points in 14 games and had a hot start to the season. It also doesn't really matter that we took 0 points in the last 4. What it comes down to is, do we make the playoffs, and who decides to pick us if we don't get a home playoff game ourselves? Right. So how is, because this is a new situation for this club.
Yes.
We've never been in the type of situation where 8 of 15 teams in your conference make the playoffs.
Right.
And we've never been in a situation where like it's that wide of a group.
I don't know. I think Nice had like 6 of 9 one time, so I think you need to do some better math here, buddy.
Well, but we were still one of the better teams. Like we were still one of the best teams pushing.
Still are, buddy.
I'm looking at our table place right now, my friend. But like, how do we convince or motivate or kind of inject this belief that it's about building, achieving a mini goal, making the playoffs, and then like the sky's the limit. Like that kind of, it's almost the opposite of what we had the last couple of years, where we were the better team and then go into a playoff situation. Like how do we set up like the run up and the build up to being able to play more free and achieving that goal of this team becoming the best version of itself?
That's a good question. I mean, first off, is right, continually building the players individually, right? Making them feel comfortable, but challenged. That no spot on the team is a guarantee, right? So you start to that, you create that good competition factor in within the team. Number 2, right? Obviously the goal is to make the playoffs. It's hard for me because I'm the kind of guy that every game matters. You need to win every game, and you need to be on top, and you need to be dominant from start to finish. That's my mentality. And sometimes that can be, sometimes that could be a lot of pressure, right? Because the guys know that I show up and it's like, yeah, there's only one option to win games. And that's the same thing for them. But it's also like, I do think it is a building process, and it's about like, for us, right, this week in training is about getting back to basics, right? Getting back to our identity, what made us who we are and what we are. Not only the first half of the first 9 games, but what made us who we are for the last 2 years. And we feel like if we get back to those things, we become a very, very, very good team. And then we keep building on that, because ultimately what you want is, right, you want to get to the place where you tweak things, but you don't change any things, and the opponent is more concerned about you, and then making wholesale changes just to be on the field with you. So that's what we're really trying to get to, and that's really where we want to go with it, and building in that way, game by game, week by week, day by day, building players individually, individual meetings from their data to their physical data to their, their mental approach to the social approach, looking at all these things.
Okay.
If you had a message for the fans that are currently despondent about 4 losses in a row, what's the message of hope? What are you, or maybe I should ask, what are you clinging to when you're thinking about this has to end?
Yeah, for me, I mean it's about I never lose my optimism. That never goes away. That never leaves, because I believe in what we do. I have an overarching mission statement that provides me a passion and a purpose every single day that I wake up to train this team, and every single day I walk into the club to make the club better. So, and I understand that road be great if it was just purely vertical, right? And we just go and we keep climbing, and we reach a level that's impossible for anybody else to climb, right? But for me, everything for me always starts with my faith. You guys heard me say that many times. It's the belief that I'm in the right place to do the right things to help to get the players to the right place. So if I start there, then it's okay, my overarching mission statement, I follow it every day. And then I do the work every day, and I put in the work every day, and looking at things, how do we get better? How do we build? How do we connect? All these things every single day are super important. But to give the belief to the player, to give the belief to the fans is, we built this team to be successful. We built this team to be a winning team. We built this team to challenge. We built this team to be in the conversation, to be one of the best teams in the league at the end of the season. And that's what we're building to. And I think that's just where we're going, because there's total faith, 100% faith in the players that we have, in the ability that we have. We know that we have to get back to our identity and our DNA. We get back to that, sky's the limit.
Beautiful.
That's honestly a great place to.
It's a great place. It's a great place to end. Coach, thank you for.
Oh, you're welcome.
For joining us. A little peek behind the curtain, folks may not know, but Rod more or less volunteered to come on the podcast because he's not ducking this. He wasn't. Matthew and I were getting together to podcast, and he basically was like, "Hey, I'd love to. If you guys want me to be on, I'd love to be on." So thank you for having that as your mentality, because it means a lot.
Yeah.
Listeners, viewers, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're not watching on YouTube, we are there. So we would love a like, a comment, and a subscribe. And sorry we didn't put out a call for mailbag, but we put out a call for mailbag before we knew Coach was coming on to this. And then we kind of just worried about that. So we'll be back. Matthew is back in town and not traveling anymore. I am not traveling, and I don't have a big camp of kids to try to supervise. So I'm back. We'll be podcasting more, and we'll catch up with you guys soon. Peace.